Hi, everyone. Welcome to the USG podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest. You are in for an incredible treat. You have the privilege today of getting to meet and get to know Jay Papasan. He is the author of the best-selling book, The One Thing. Jay's curiosity about why some people get extraordinary outcomes and others do not helped fuel his work with Gary Keller to write The One Thing, which has sold over 1.3 million copies worldwide and has garnered more than 400 appearances on national bestseller lists, including #1 on the Wall Street Journal's hardcover business list, and has been translated into 30 different languages. Whether working with his wife, Wendy, to raise funds for Heroes for Children, inspiring others to take action toward their goals, or aiming to be the best husband and father he can be, Jay strives to remain awake and aware with clarity and focus on his values and goals. Jay Papasan, as I'd mentioned earlier, is the best-selling author and vice president and executive editor at Keller Williams Realty, Inc., the world's largest real estate company. He's also co-owner alongside his wife, Wendy, of Papasan Properties Group. They live in Austin, Texas, go Austin, with their 2 kids, Gus and Veronica, and their dog, Taco. And I had the privilege of getting to meet you, Jay, a couple years ago at a mastermind in Austin. I was blown away. I love your book. I am so thrilled to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it was fun. I was just remembering when you brought that up, I didn't actually talk about The One Thing that much. We talked about it a little bit, and then we talked about giving, I believe.
Yes.
That very special mastermind, and how I was like, oh yeah, talk about giving. These people love to give. So
yeah. Yeah, the whole focus. And I was thinking, I had read, your book a couple years ago, and, just to get right into it, I'm new entrepreneur, solo entrepreneur, reading about, you got to focus on the one thing. And I'm looking at my husband. We ended up getting, we had to stay in Florida because there was a storm where I lived. So, it was quite a lovely extra couple days there. And I was working through this book and I thought, my gosh, I am struggling big time with the one thing. And so, I'm excited to dive in because there's so much wisdom in this book. And a lot of listeners have been asking about time management and time blocking and how to do this. So we've got a lot of great stuff to cover.
Fantastic. And like I was saying, I still love talking about this book. It's changed my life and my family's life. So Let's dive in. Where can we best help everyone in your audience?
Yeah. So, I think let's start with just, the premise, the research, how you even got to this idea and got the research that you put together to write such an incredibly powerful book.
Sure. At the time, it took us almost 4.5 years to write the book.
Oh, wow.
So it was a long journey. It was our first non-real estate related book. We'd written several books before that, but we were breaking out of our category. So we wanted to do it right and well. But it started actually with an essay. I was running our education division in the company at that time, and I helped create a new course that Gary was reviewing. He took it home for the weekend, came back on Monday with a new introduction called The Power of One. And it was like 10 or 12 pages. And I remember looking at Gary and going, this is a book. And he goes, I thought the same thing. And so the seeds of the book started some, 4.5 years before it was published in 2013. And then we outlined, the way we work is we kind of have our hypothesis. We kind of outline what we think the book should have. And we have a lot of fun with that. We were already coming up with the lies and all that stuff that we can talk about. The focusing question. And then we had 2 full-time researchers on our team.
Oh, wow.
And they were tasked with helping us find supporting stories and evidence. And there was one lady named Kyla that I often would get to go find information that actually countered our arguments. So we wouldn't suffer from the confirmation bias. But in general, we use that kind of a blind second person looking to argue against us. And then we also interviewed a lot of people and asked, what do they have in common? And that's kind of our research process and kind of how we distill the book from, I think in the last draft we submitted to the publisher was 440 pages.
Wow.
He kicked it back to us, said someone who buys a book called The One Thing doesn't want a doorstop. So we applied the very principles we were talking about and got it down to about 220 pages. That's how the book showed up in the world.
Wow. Let's go into some of those principles, because there's some absolutely I know who are on this, listening to this episode, that have read The One Thing. Most people that I coach and work with, whenever I'm in a leadership group or company or one-on-one, it's one of the books. It's actually in my own book. I always recommend your book, and I'm constantly working on it. But let's go into the principles for those that are newer to it.
Well, the big idea is actually nothing new. I usually tell people, if there's something I want you to take away, is we looked at what extraordinary meant in the world, extraordinary success. And we tried to find a common approach for that. And some of it was based on Gary's experience, and some of it was based on our research. And the operative word in our subtitle is the surprisingly simple truth, is the word simple.
Right.
So Gary and I are both pragmatists. When I read a book, I'm usually writing notes right at the beginning. Like, what are my takeaways? I don't want to read the book just to know about the book. I want to take action on it. Right. And we both get very frustrated with books that are all about high concepts and no execution.
Yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell, I love him, but I'm not always sure what to do with his books, right? So we try to be very pragmatic, and that is all about being simple, because your life is already complicated enough without having to assimilate a very complicated plan. So I'll just say that as a kind of a preface, that hopefully people won't be discouraged that it doesn't sound more sophisticated than it is. But if I was summing up the book for my 11-year-old kid, ask the question, what's the one thing I can do right now, right? So that would have the most impact towards what I want to have happen, whether that be for school, for sports, for my business, whatever. And we have a very specific way of saying that question. We can talk about it, but it's what's one thing I can do. Trust your answer. In my experience, and we've probably taught to 10,000 people at this point, I was so worried that people wouldn't know the answer. Right. The reality is most people know the answer. They're not stopping to ask it, and they're also feeling very guilty about it. So listen to your answer. So the first thing is, there's an activity that's missing from your success. So if you're one thing right now, you ask that question and you said, wow, I just need to reduce my stress.
Right.
Well, that is not an activity. How do you reduce your stress?
Right.
So maybe it's, I need to exercise more. I need to meditate, right? It has to be an activity. And then step 2 is you time block it. And time blocking is simply making an appointment with yourself to do that work. That our publisher would constantly say, it's all about making an appointment with yourself to do your most important work.
Right.
And our research shows that if you actually go through that simple task of managing your time, saying, all right, I know I need to exercise for 20 minutes. When am I going to do it, and where am I going to do it? You're 3 times more likely to do it. And it sounds so simple. Like, I know how to put something on my calendar.
Yeah.
And when I get a reminder on my phone, it's generally a cue. Hey, I've got 15 minutes before I have to start doing that activity, like this interview, right? We already are programmed to follow those instructions. What we don't do a good job of is saying yes to something and then getting it on our calendar. So there's that as the second step. And then the last step is just protecting that. So you get it on your calendar, and that's really a big part of the battle. But now you have to say no to the world. How do you actually follow through on that commitment?
Yeah.
And we can go into bigger detail, but really that's it. I tell you, we've probably brought 3,000 or 4,000 people through our online course. And our simple goal is to get them to ask that question, come up with a powerful answer, and then time block it. And then in our world, and if you remember, discipline is a lie is one of the chapters in the book.
Yeah.
We want people to make that most important thing in their life a habit. And in our research, we found that takes on average about 66 days.
Yeah.
So our goal was, how many people can we get to form at least one habit that would positively impact their lives? And the response we get is, well, great. So I start meditating in the morning. What is that going to do?
Right.
In my experience, that tiny little foothold of success has a halo effect. And there's some really good research around it. The researchers in Australia who pioneered that research around the 66 days, when people formed a habit, and it could be anything, going to yoga class, drinking 8 glasses of water, making their bed, whatever that habit was, they had fewer dirty dishes. They slept better. There were all these other positive things that started showing up. And they didn't know why that was. I have a suspicion.
Yeah. What is it?
As crazy as your life is, as crazy as my life is. I've got 2 teenagers and older parents, and you just know all the things that happen every day on top of business.
Yeah.
when you establish that you actually have control of your life in one area, it allows you and gives you confidence to add to it. So great, I'm meditating for 5 minutes every morning. That's now becomes kind of a platform that you get to build on. And I've just seen it with thousands of people. That simple activity done well allows them to start adding to it and adding to it. So that's a super simple version. We can dive into all of the different elements in more detail if you want, but I wanted to give the high level. That's really the heart of the book in my mind.
Wow, fantastic. Well, so just reflecting, I mean, so first is that question of what's the one thing that I can do right now that would impact whatever area of life you're looking at. So first and I'm hearing, I actually remembering, I'm like, I had an answer and then I would second guess it. And I thought, okay, Julie, right there. And then I got to trust my gut. So right there, then if you're wavering, that could be something to look at, like trust yourself, trust that.
Yeah. If you're driving, pull over before you write it down. Right.
Right. Exactly.
But a lot of times I do see that even in the audience, if I'm giving a keynote, the actual question, we call it the focusing question.
Right.
It came out of years of Gary coaching people. And you do coaching, right? So,
yes.
At the end of your coaching consultation, you usually have to make an agreement. What are you going to get done between now and our next call?
Yeah.
Or our next meeting if you do it in person. And Gary would have these conversations with people, and these are the best of the best in our company. And they would say, all right, I'm going to do 1 through 5. And the next week they'd come back and they would have made progress, but they almost never did number 1.
Right.
And so he started getting frustrated and say, Julie, if you can only do 3 things this week, what are they going to be?
Yeah.
And then come back and you do 2 and 3, but not number 1. And so it was really in frustration that he narrowed his coaching clients down to what's one thing you can do between now and next week.
Yeah.
And what happened was kind of magical. When you only have one thing on your list, it's total accountability. Either you did it or you didn't. There's no place to hide.
Great.
So that's a big deal right there by itself. So immediately everyone started doing the number 1 thing on their list. And what surprised him is they would do their one thing and then they would do everything else too. And it's like, if you just get them in the right order, it kind of knocks all those dominoes down. So over time, and this was years and years, he kind of came up with a very specific way of phrasing it. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? It's a mouthful. I get it. But in the beginning, we hope that people will just look at it and say, all right, I'm just going to ask the question as it is. I'm not going to do creative shortcuts and try to figure it out.
Right.
And the answers tend to come. A powerful question gives you a powerful answer. So it's not 3 things. It's not 10 things. Right. Every entrepreneur has 20 things.
Right.
What's the one thing, right? And it's not could, should, or would do. It's can do. You need to get into successful action today. And that creates momentum and it gives you a feedback cycle, right? Would do could be next year. You get no feedback from that.
Right.
And then the whole second half, such that by doing it, everything's easier or necessary. That's Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. You're trying to find the most leveraged activity in order to do what it is that you need to do. And that's just asking the question. Most people kind of intuitively know it. And if not, it's usually a short path to figuring it out.
Right.
So that's like really right there. That's a big part of it, is asking the right question and trusting your answer. And I'm telling you, every time I ask it, I know the answer. Like, I'm like, okay, do my goals match that answer? Because does my calendar match that answer is really the right question as well.
Very, very good question. I love that. Does the calendar? I actually started this a couple years ago. I started color coding it so I could go through it quickly and see, I say that I want to go to the gym, but there's not a lot of blue on there. So I need to get more blue. I don't know why blue, but that's what it is. That's helped me a lot. I'm very visual. And I love this.
My coach actually asked for access to my calendar.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so how many writing days are you going to have this year? And my goal, I could look at it. I think I'm going to have 180 writing days is when I worked out vacations and speaking events and everything.
Wow.
I've got 180 days that I can dedicate at least half of it to writing. He's like, great. That's my number one thing, right? As a writer, if I don't write, I'm not going to ever have another book. And so pretty clear for me. It's a little easier maybe. And he said, great. Can I get access to your Outlook calendar? I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. But I think a great question you can always ask is, does my calendar match my intentions?
That's a great
Show me where you
question.
spend your time, and I'll tell you what your actual priorities are.
Yeah.
And that's very incriminating for most of us, right? I'm guilty too. I don't live it perfectly.
I love that. Does my calendar match my intentions? And you made me think of something. I usually schedule most everything, but for example, meditation is something, we both know and love the Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod. I try to
Oh,
do,
yeah.
My version of it, but I always meditate and journal. And, it's occurring to me, I would normally put that in my calendar, and I probably should put that in. Like, that should go in there.
Is it automatic? Do you ever forget to?
No, today. So that's a good question. I don't today because it's become, it's like brushing my teeth. I mean, I have to, be weird if I didn't.
That's the example I often use, right? I'm a parent, and I know it takes 8 to 10 years to teach a child to actually brush their teeth.
Yeah.
I mean, you hector them, you threaten them.
So true.
You have to smell their breath before they get in bed. It's ridiculous, right? And I'm kind of ashamed. Like, I don't even want to ask my parents how long they had to nag me to get me to really do it. And my mom's a dental hygienist, so who knows? She probably knows. So, but now we don't think about that at all.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of, we say success is sequential. And you focus on that one thing until it becomes a habit.
Okay.
Then you get to add the next one. And a lot of people call that habit stacking, right? In my mind, the Miracle Morning, right, the Savers program, that's actually habit stacking.
Yeah.
He's trying to make, is it 6 activities or 5? I forget.
6. Yeah, 6.
Yeah, he's trying to make 6 activities, one segment, and making that segment a habit.
Yeah.
In my casual conversations, I find that people end up creating their own little stack with elements they like from his.
Yeah.
And some of that could be what stuck or didn't, but you're actually trying to create 6 habits at once, in my understanding of how habits are formed.
Yeah.
But if you did that over time, it would take you about a year to do that, all 6 habits.
Wow. Yeah.
And then to say, I'm going to get up early. Actually, it might be 7. First thing is, I got to start getting up early.
That is definitely a habit that I am still working on. I got to be honest.
There you go.
Yeah.
Remind me, I'll give you a great hack for that.
Please.
And then each of the 6 savers, right, you would go through and do in order. Then you would be building those up. Because I know a lot of successful people who have rituals they follow in the morning, and they're so ingrained they don't have to think about them.
Right.
And I just think it happens over time.
Right.
So you want my get up in the morning hack?
Oh, please.
Okay.
Please.
You can mark your calendar for it.
Okay.
So, in the fall, you're going to fall back.
Right.
What does everybody do that Sunday?
Sleep an extra hour. Yeah.
So instead of grabbing an extra hour, keep getting up at the same time. You'll have 0 sleep deprivation, and you'll gain a whole hour in your morning. So whatever time you're actually naturally getting up now, every year you can add an hour to that without any sleep deprivation. The pain comes in the spring, right?
Yeah.
But instead of taking that extra hour, and so I think it was trying to think of a woman who's I always blank on her name. She wrote the Happiness Project. Gretchen Rubin.
Oh, Gretchen Rubin. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to her about her last book, and she's the one who shared that tip with me, so I'll give her credit. That's
so great. No, I will take all the hacks I can for waking up earlier. It's great. That's good for everyone listening. Fall back.
Better have young kids, right? Young kids taught me to wake up early, and I just stuck with the habit.
They did, and I didn't stick with it, but it's okay. My son comes in early usually. So now it's mix or match, depends. This is so great. Now, this is really, really helpful. I loved going back to that question about, does my calendar match my intentions? Like, that's just a great question. Anyone listening, you can do this right now, and not if you're driving, but when you're stopped, look at your calendar. And if it doesn't, you can change it now. I
can tell them what most people will see. And I want to take them off the hook. In my experience, most people's calendars have very few appointments with themselves.
Right.
Maybe if they're going to yoga class, something that they have to pay for or something like that.
Yeah.
Most of the things on their calendar are meetings with other people. That's how we're actually taught to use calendars for the most part. So the key to time blocking is the first thing you put on your calendar is going to be your most important appointment with yourself. And back in 1997, I ran the New York Marathon. I'm not a marathoner. I'm, 6'2", 120 pounds. I'm like in the Clydesdale division. I am the least marathon-y kind of guy, right? But I did it to quit smoking. But I remember I was really dedicated to making that happen. My whole calendar revolved around my running times, right? Everything revolved around that. And most people have experienced something like that. Maybe it was finals for their last semester, something, that they had to really say, all right, everything in my life is revolving around this thing. Maybe it was their wedding and everything was working backwards. We've all done it on some level. The key is to start doing that for these little things that matter a lot. And say, no matter what, I'm getting up to meditate tomorrow. Yeah. Or no matter what, I'm getting up and I'm going to spend 30 minutes reading so I can improve my mind. Or I'm going to start my day tomorrow and I'm going to lead generate for my business for 2 hours because I know that more than anything else, that will impact my business. And you make a stand around that one thing. That's what we mean. It doesn't mean you don't have anything else on your calendar. I mean, you're a solopreneur. I've got 2 assistants and I still am juggling lots of stuff.
Right.
The whole thing about the one thing isn't that there's nothing else.
Right.
It's that at any given point, you understand what your number one priority is.
Can you say a little more for those that are also solopreneurs or running the household of their family or in any way, because I'm honestly thinking, and part of, and I'm just thinking for others, this must be an issue. You probably have heard this, Jay. I mean, right now, so I'm thinking there are a couple different things like working, I have some programs that I need to put together. I've got a online course I'm about to run. I've got just regular keeping up on social media. Like there's a couple different things that are really important. And I'm thinking, God, how do I even decipher what is that one thing right now? And as a solopreneur, it feels like, I'm running the whole show really, even with assistants. It's still,
you are, right? Ultimately, you're responsible for it all, even if other people are doing some of the tasks. You're ultimately responsible. And that's division managers. I mean, stay-at-home parents. They all have the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you work from a to-do list?
Yes, I do. I do schedule things. I schedule most everything so that it goes from my to-do list onto my calendar. But I do have a to-do list. And what's so funny, I could show it to you. I actually need to write it by hand and I do it every week. And I have
Most people do. That's why I asked. I just wanted to confirm. So we'll just go through this. So do you write that for the week, for the day, for the month? What's your frame of reference usually?
Yeah, I have a very bizarre right brain way of doing it. I do it usually every week to 10 days. And I don't love numbers, so I have symbols that I use, but okay. I'm a hard case.
That works.
That's all right. Yeah. And
I'm going to give you numbers though.
Okay. Give me numbers, please.
Right. Because the one thing relies on at least one number.
Yes. Yes. Important.
We call it turning a to-do list into a success list. It's pretty early in the book. So we talked about the 80-20 principle.
Right.
And just mentioned it in passing earlier.
Right.
It basically says, and this is maybe not a proven scientific fact, but it's pretty close to one in my experience for success, that the minority of what we do will give us the majority of what we want.
Right.
And a lot of times that turns out to 20% of what we do will give us 80% of our results. It's kind of uncanny. I did the numbers on Keller Williams Realty last year. 20% of our agents sold 80% down to the decimal.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I expected it to be close, not exact. And that actually happens. So we're going to use that principle. And when you look at your list, ask the question of all of this stuff, right? Because a to-do list is everything that you have to do. So the first step is put a star, right? We'll go to your symbols. What's your symbol for important? An asterisk?
I exactly have an asterisk and it's circled. If it's not circled, it's really 1 versus 2. It's just, I like it. It's pretty early.
I got it. So you get an asterisk and then it's circled for the things that are truly important. So on my list for the 7 or 10 day period, what are the things that actually stand out? So create a new list with only those things on it. So now you've probably gone from 20 things to say 5.
Okay.
And then you're going to do one more step.
Okay.
Of these 5 or 6 things, if I only got one done this week, what would be the most important thing that I would get done? That becomes your number 1. And then you ask, if I got that thing done and I still had time and energy and resources, what would be the next thing that would be most important? And that becomes your number 2. And then you go through that process. And I've done this exercise with corporate trainings and classrooms. And you'll see people go from about 20 to 30 things down to about 4 to 5 things, usually 3 actually, and they're always in order of priority.
Yeah.
What that does for you, it doesn't mean that the other 20 things don't have to get done.
Right.
What it means is when you go in tomorrow morning, you start with your number 1. That's the thing that goes on your calendar first. And when you've done all you can, you go to number 2. And you work your way backwards from priority.
Right.
And at some point, you'll ask that question, maybe in 7 days. And the thing that was at the bottom of the list is now moving to the top because you got a deadline. So now it's becoming a priority.
Yeah.
But the longer you do this, you tend to get ahead of those and you have less things that are urgent and more things that are important, to use Dr. Covey's language.
Right.
So it's real simple. First, separate the really meaningful stuff from just the task.
Right.
And then prioritize the meaningful work. Number 1 to whatever that is. I wouldn't say it's usually more than 5 for a week. That's a long list in my book.
Okay.
And time block the big priorities and then batch the others. So like a lot of people, the first thing they do when they wake up is they check their email.
Right.
And email is essentially a grand repository of other people's priorities.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with yours. So that's something that needs to be batched. So after you've done your one thing for the day, go ahead and time block a 30-minute time block. Say to 8:30, or at 8 in the morning, like you've done all your morning personal stuff. I'm going to batch email for just 30 minutes to clear my decks. And then I'm going to go into my most important work. And you set a timer. And you can do as much as you want in the 30 minutes, not doing it until you're done. Because for me, email without a timer is like a time machine. I'll look up and 2 hours have gone by.
Totally.
And then you could do another one at noon and another one at the end of the day. So you've given yourself 3 20-minute windows or 3 30-minute windows, whatever. I don't know how much email you get. You know that it's not nagging at you. You see those little numbers counting up on your email.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'll do that at lunch, or I'll do that before I leave to go home. And the important work is the stuff that you really focus on, and that allows you to put the other stuff away, right? You may have customer service things. You may have to do graphics for, social media. Those are all things that could be batched because ultimately they have to get done, but they're not priorities. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This is, and what I'm realizing, it's funny today, maybe because I knew we were doing this interview, literally today was one of the first days I actually intuitively, I've read the book, but I did that and I felt so much more clear-headed. I only gave myself, it was about 45 minutes, but I just ran through the emails and I color-coded them and I did the ones that were really like the most important. And then I just went through my list. I actually got through 4 things before our session, which was hyper beast mode. But I think what I can imagine people listening and even for myself is that what it comes down to then is really being in that, setting those boundaries and keeping to them. So I got to tell you, Jay, honestly, I know not to check email in the morning. I would say I'm about 75% doing that. There's still times, and it's not a habit yet. I'm working on it because it's a drain. It's an energy suck. I can feel it. And I think you're absolutely right.
There are programs you can download on your phone and your computer that will block you from doing that.
Oh, well, I did not know that.
You could make it your one thing to go for 66 days without checking email before 10 a.m. Right? And it's a win, right? It's actually harder to break bad habits than to form new ones.
Yeah.
But whatever you need, if that's something that's constantly kind of undermining your progress, then focus on it, eliminate it, build a new habit that gets you around it.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful thing that you can do for yourself. So hopefully that success list gives you a framework. There is all that stuff. They just need to be done at the right time.
Sure.
And I'll just tell you very honestly, on my bad days, I'll go in and instead of doing those handful of things that actually matter, I'll start working on the long list. And you know why? Because making it shorter makes me feel better.
Right.
And I can literally work hard into a lather all day long, come home, and my wife will go, "Hey, how was your day? What'd you do?" And I'll be like, "I have no idea.
Right.
I worked really hard. Well, what did you accomplish? I don't know." And those are those days, right? And one of the things we say is activity is not the same thing as productivity. So being busy, right, has nothing to do with good business. I'm not even sure that's in the book. I may have just coined that one. It's not even that good, but that's what we do, right?
That's pretty
come
good.
up with things to remember. So I think when we're acting in our priorities is the only time we're truly being productive.
Yeah. This is so helpful. And it's interesting. I've had, as I said earlier, quite a few people have written in asking, can you go over time management and feeling overwhelmed and focusing on one thing? And, I'm a multi-passionate entrepreneur. There are a couple different things that I'm doing. Do you recommend having a couple different lists depending on, talking about health, and a list for your family, and list for business and for hobbies? Or now we're getting detailed, but I don't know. What do you?
No, that's fine. That's fine. There's a page in the book, page 114. It's the only one I've memorized.
It's pretty good.
We've got 7 circles, the 7 parts of your life that Gary and I felt like using these tools really matters. Your spiritual health, your physical health,
right,
your personal life, right? Your job, your business, your money, your relationships, they're all in there. I got relationships out of order. That comes after personal health. You look up, and that's where I would apply it. I think a lot of people see that and they start saying, I want to build a habit in each of those areas. And they would be right. They just need to do one at a time.
Right.
So I track my goals into 2 buckets.
Okay.
That's what I learned from Gary. I have my professional and I have my personal. Called work and life. And we need to be really highly disciplined at work, right? It's okay to let those fires just keep burning, because the big stuff is how we really propel our businesses forward.
Yeah.
No one gets a promotion for being on time to every meeting.
Right.
Or perfect attendance. They actually get promotions for what they get done.
Yeah.
And so we have to realize that not everything matters equally, and attack the world that way. And at work, that means we're putting off things like emails and clients that don't quite matter as much. And that can be painful. I don't like that chaos. That doesn't work well with my personality.
Yeah.
But it happens, and that's the right way to do it. In your life, if I'm on a business trip for 5 days, I need to go spend time with my kids. So the thing is, in your life, we act from a slightly different set of principles.
Yeah.
We don't neglect things that are really important to us in those other areas for very long at all. If we do, they can have a big impact on our life. So we say go long at work and be constantly counterbalancing at home. So you're constantly taking time for yourself, for your spiritual health, for your family, your relationships. Those things ultimately will be more important than your work.
Yeah.
They're foundational for your work. We all know people whose health has failed and their work has failed as a result, or their marriage has failed and their work has suffered.
Yeah. So
those are really foundational issues. And if we're not giving them regular attention, it can be a real problem.
I think it's such a great point. I'm thinking, for those that, for example, somebody who's head of the household or stay-at-home mom, which I personally think is the hardest job. I tried it for a little bit, and I mean, really, it was not the best fit. I thought, I'm actually better if I'm not at home that much. I have friends that are, and I'm amazed because it's no joke. I know there are people, sometimes I have a very close friend. I don't know if she'll be listening to this one. She has a son that's been on and off ill, and it's very taxing on the family, and they're incredible family. She's amazing. She's been a total warrior, as has her son. I know now she's starting to put more things on her calendar for herself, but it was really hard for a while. One
of the things that there are periods of time, usually short, where we're in the trenches and it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But when the oxygen mask deploys on an airplane, are you supposed to put it on yourself or the kid next to you first?
Yeah, it's yourself.
Right. Because if you pass out, you won't be there to take care of the person who can't help themselves.
Yeah.
So a little bit of, it's like altruistic selfishness. I don't even know what to call it.
Right.
But if you don't do some self-care, you can't care for the people who matter most. And I don't know why. It's a really, really hard thing for a lot of working moms to hear.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a hormonal thing. I don't know. I don't want to make gross assumptions, but it's just been, in my experience, it's been a tougher sell there.
Right.
Maybe because society judged them a lot harder than men.
Yeah.
But you've got to do some self-care, and going to the spa once a quarter does not mean you have a personal life. That doesn't count.
Yeah.
That's like triage,
Right.
right? So get a personal something like on Saturdays. My wife, she runs a business that did 3 million in gross revenue last year. Huge business, spans multiple states, amazing entrepreneur.
Mm.
Saturday or Sunday morning, every single week, she's going to be on for about 3 hours.
Yeah.
She's going to line up. She's got a habit that knocks out 3 or 4 of those circles. Her best friend and her go on a long walk around Town Lake. So they get outdoors, they get exercise, and they get all their socialization. It's like a 10-mile walk.
Wow.
They always stop for coffee. They get to catch up on their weeks. And that's like, everybody in our household knows, like, hey, great, I got the dog. You go hang out with Jenny. You know, it's like we get out of the way. I do the laundry then. That's
awesome.
how it works. But she needs to counterbalance regularly. She needs to address those areas of her life. Friendships she doesn't get to spend as much time with, and her health, and a little outdoor time just for her. We all need to build those rituals into our life. My only advice is don't do them all at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? One at a time. You can build an amazing habit in each of those 7 areas for your family. We've done it. And we have rituals that kind of help keep those things moving, even when they're not getting maybe our full attention.
That's such great wisdom. And I mean, I got to be honest. One of the things that shifted for me this year is I stopped, I was going to the gym and exercising, kind of got bored, and I was doing it haphazardly, and it really affected my energy. And I also have an autoimmune condition. So for me, it's crucial. And as a mom, entrepreneur, I mean, it's non-negotiable. And what I've done is, it's amazing. I just started making, 5 days a week, usually now 4 or 5 days a week, I found my favorite classes or times that I want to go to the gym, and I book everything around that. And there was a moment, a friend of mine was like, people said, like, can you talk or meet then? And I tell them usually no, I have an appointment then. And it's become like, no one's going to do that for me. So I'm thinking, for those listening, like, no one's going to do this for you. No one's going to do that unless you do it. And there's usually no shame.
I want to just pause. I'm going to interrupt you 1 second. Because you said something really brilliant, and I want to underscore it.
Thank you.
The script, when someone asks you to violate that time block for your personal time, don't tell them, I'm going to an exercise class.
Right.
Don't tell them, I've got to walk with my best friend scheduled in. Because they may not respect your answer.
Yeah.
Just say, I'm sorry, I already have another commitment. Could you do it later or earlier? Yeah. Most people, unless they're completely narcissistic, are not going to say, well, what are you doing then?
Right. Right. And it's an indication to me, if they do say that, then we may not be a good fit. Right. So, exactly. Right.
So I already have another commitment. You said, I'm already busy. Any of those work, you do not share the details. So I interrupted your flow, but that's how you protect. That's one of the first ways you protect that essential thing for you. And it sounds like that's very essential.
Totally.
And that's one of the great ways to protect it. Put it on your calendar and don't tell everybody about it. Right. Just tell them you have a commitment then, and you see them after or before.
Yeah. It took some time. And I know probably those listening in, it might be weird or awkward or feel, I even had this like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. My whole day is circulating around this. However, my whole day ends up being a million times better. And I'm sure you've seen that. I mean, it's a huge difference the last 6 months. Huge.
Well, I told you my wife and I get up. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we get up at 5:10, and we have a trainer that shows up at 5:30.
Wow.
And we work out together. And that's been 7.5 years we've been doing that.
Wow.
So 3 of our 4 workouts are kind of handled. And I wanted accountability, because if it's me going to the gym, I'll find a million excuses.
Yeah.
If someone's coming to us, I remember our first trainer, Dallas, he's like, dude, if I get up and I'm at your house at 5:30 and you're not in the driveway, I'm banging on your front door until you come out. And I'm like, okay, that's accountability. And,
that's one way.
It's not a habit. And I got to tell you, even today, I was telling you, I'm on this weird kind of cleansing fast, 800 calories. I worked out this morning with Devin and my wife.
Wow.
And without a lot of calories, but I feel great for having done it. It really is amazing when you make those commitments and start keeping them.
Yeah.
The longer you keep them, the more invested you are in not breaking those rituals. Because it is kind of boring and monotonous. A lot of successful things are. Yeah. So, but if you stick with them long enough, like brushing your teeth, they can kind of become, that's just who you are. And everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And then they stop fighting you, and you stop fighting you.
That is so excellent. Are there any other hacks, tips, things that we haven't talked about? I mean, I'm sure you have a ton of them. So,
Well,
Jay, just in whatever you can think of.
there we go. No problem.
Lay it
We
on
talked
us.
about the nitty gritty, right? We've gotten down to what am I doing this week?
Right.
Something I'm pretty passionate about. My wife and I have been doing now for like 12 years, and we've been facilitating it for 2, is we believe, and it's in the book, we call it goal setting to the now, that if you're going to be really appropriate in the moment, it's not just about having your priorities for the week. It's about aligning those priorities with your 5-year and someday goals. So I'm very invested in my marriage. We're about to hit our 20th anniversary this year. Yay for us.
Yay.
And we both are entrepreneurs. So we can drive each other absolutely crazy if we want to. Hey, I'm doing this. Really? You're doing that? When did you tell me that? And we have small kids, teenagers now, but it's still a lot. So we started taking one night at the end of the year, November, December, and we go get a hotel room. Now we might make it a vacation as we have more resources. Yeah. In the beginning, we just got on Priceline. We got out of our environment, and we would go the night before. We would just go to a restaurant and talk about what do we want to have happen next year. And the next day, we'd sit in our hotel room, order room service, and we would spend the entire day trying to get on the same page, not just for the next year, but for our 5-year goals as well. And I'll tell you, here, like I carry my annual goals with my monthly goals, my weekly goals. This is a process we teach from the book. Wow. And right underneath it, everywhere I go, I've got 2 pages. It's my 5-year family goals.
Wow.
And so
that's awesome.
Here's that's a 2-in-1 for you. Last year, I was teaching a goal setting class with my partner, Jeff Woods, who does our podcast. And I asked how many of you set goals. And there were about 1,000 people in the room, all business people, and it was January. Every hand went up. And then Jeff asked, great, keep your hand up. Now, how many of you set goals with your significant other? And only 4 hands stayed up. And the energy just went out of the room. And that's when I knew it was like, okay, this is probably a really important thing that we're doing, not just a little thing. Yeah. So I would just say, if you're listening to this, one, you need to get clear about where you're going, because your 5-year goals, right, should tell you what you need to do this year. Right. And your annual goals should tell you what you should do this month. And your monthly goals should tell you what you're going to do this week. And your weekly goals should tell you what you're going to do today. Right. If you work backwards like that, it's actually kind of simple. You never know for sure exactly how doing this year will affect you in 5 years, but it's a pretty darn good guess. Right. And going through that exercise with your significant other, we fight less. We're on the same page about money. We understand where we're going. We do great with vacations. That's one of the fun things we plan. So I'll just say that would be like a double whammy. If you're solo, just take the time and say, where do I want to be in 5 years? Yeah. Because otherwise you're just chasing the next thing, and it may be taking you in the exact opposite direction from where you ultimately want to go if you haven't asked that question.
Very, very, very powerful. And I can share in 1 minute quickly that, I had noticed last year, for example, I was speaking a lot and traveling, and it occurred to me recently looking at the new year, and I realized, yes, I want to be doing that, and I want to change the parameters because I have 2 kids and I wasn't seeing them a whole lot. And I realized, and my husband and I, I love what you just said. If you're solo, you can do this yourself. Where do I want to be, or where do we want to be? We did this in a smaller way, and it changed it changed everything. So I think this is so powerful.
If your husband and your kids know why it's important to you and your career that you leave them to go do this, then they'll be more supportive. Yeah. And that's kind of the 2-step of goals is, what do you want to do and why is that important to you? And it was so funny. We were facilitating a goal setting retreat this fall in Austin, and we had about 150 people there. It was great fun. And one of my friends, John, came up, and he and his wife were trading 5-year goals. And she wanted to have a stress-free lifestyle. And he goes, and I want a second home. Tell her that I'm right. And I'm like, I won't do that. But this is kind of a Mars versus Venus thing. And it's one of the reasons we want you to do it together. Yeah. So she's telling you the outcome why something's important, but not what it is. So ask her, I love your goal of having a carefree lifestyle. What is it we need to accomplish to make that happen for you? And in return, you have to tell her what having a second home will do for you so that she knows why it's important to you. Because I can guarantee you, she hears second home and she's probably thinking, great, I've got twice the maintenance, twice the things to take care of, twice the bills. That doesn't sound carefree. Right. So y'all need to communicate both halves of your goals. And that little tweak, right, just in the moment, kind of unlocked, and they realized that both of their goals could be accomplished. They just weren't communicating them effectively.
Oh, that's so powerful. That's so smart. Yeah, I think that, so it's the what and then the why. Right. What is it and then why? Right.
Why is it important?
Yeah. Why is it important? And I love it.
It's an old trick. You go into someone's house. My wife does this. I don't, but I know it. You ask someone, why are you selling your house? And they'll tell you, my child's a violinist and we're going to move closer to the school. Great. How much do you think it's worth? That's the sanity question. Right. And the other question you always ask is, what will you do if your house doesn't sell? And in this framework is, what will happen if you don't accomplish that goal? And it's the failure question. And I can tell you, if there is no price, right? Oh, we'll just stay here. Then they probably won't price their home or stage their home appropriately to sell it. If they get lucky, they're great, but they won't do any of the hard work. But if they say something like, but my son got into Juilliard, he won't be able to go to Juilliard and fulfill his lifelong mission if we don't sell the house. Guess what? They're very motivated. Yeah. And I usually talk to entrepreneurs, and I ask that why question very, very tough way. Why do you want to do it? And then I usually ask that next question, and what's going to happen if you fail? Because a lot of times our goals are very aspirational. Yeah, you'd like to run a marathon. Yeah, you'd like to climb Kilimanjaro. But if there's no real penalty to failure, how motivated are you? Is that about you or is that about someone else? And I've seen people tear up when I ask that question. Yeah. And that's a great sign. That means that even if they can't articulate it, that the thought of failing is so painful, they don't even want to go there. Guess what? Those people are probably going to make great progress towards that goal.
Yeah, well said. Oh my gosh. Well, and I love what you said, even going back to the beginning, that, this is simplistic in the sense that it's not rocket science. It's important to be asking these questions. And there's such a great framework here. I'm going to make sure to put this all in the show notes. And then obviously the best thing is to get your book. I mean, I'm guessing most people listening have it, either haven't listened to it or have read it or listened to it, and or should get it now. I actually look back on it. It was right when I started my business. It was about 5 years ago. It's so interesting because actually things have changed a little bit in some of the areas. But
one of those that changes based on where you are. Yes. I'll give my partner Gary. A lot of the questions came from him. He's a self-made billionaire. He's incredibly successful, and he's also a great dad and a great husband. And asking those questions at different times in your life, your answers change. Yeah. So it is worthwhile. Our team posted on social media today, how many times have you read the book? And I was going to post, like 9 or 10 times, right? I have to reread it to prepare for speeches and all that. Someone had posted 61 times. I'm like, what? So I've got a call scheduled. I'm about to interview this gentleman and find out what in the world's going on.
Yeah, that's almost a habit now. It's a habit to read your book. It's five times away.
And it's such a specific number. It wasn't 15, right? It wasn't 20. It was 61. It's like a random number, which gives it a lot of validity. I don't know. We'll find out.
That's awesome. Well, it got best-selling in a lot of categories for a reason. I mean, it was profound for me. And what's the best way to either find out more about you, what you're doing, what you're writing, the book, if there's any, I think you had mentioned that there's some success worksheets or something that people can download. Where do we go?
If people go to theonething.com, and that's with the number one thing.com. We have our podcast there. We have tons of free resources. Awesome. We actually have a kick-ass guide to a couples goal setting retreat where we break down everything that I talked about.
Oh, wow.
That's a fabulous resource. We facilitate that and sell out every year. So that's like, but it's free. I don't want to make it, if people want to facilitate it, awesome. But if they just want to do it, I want them to do it because it's made a huge impact for us. We
Wow.
actually have a kick-ass guide to goal setting. And that'll walk you through that process of the 5-year, the 1 year. This document that I showed is called the 411. How to start working from a one piece of paper that really kind of summarizes what you need to do in the near future. And it's in alignment with all the other stuff. So anyway, there's lots of free stuff there. People can dive into it with or without reading the book. It should make sense.
That's fantastic. I actually have a signed copy of your book from you, and
Yay.
would have been nice for me to think about bringing it on, showing it on camera, but that's okay. It's upstairs. I actually, I go back to it a lot. And so it's the one thing with number1.com, and there are tons of resources. This has been just illuminating, eye-opening, interesting. Like, I actually don't want to end, to be very honest.
Then, you know what? If your audience has more questions, we can do it again. We'll just schedule a follow-up.
Oh my God, Jay, that I have a feeling that might happen because I've gotten a lot of questions about this, and you've been great. I'll tell you, cleanse or no cleanse, fast or no fast, you are on it. So whatever you're doing works well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Your one thing principle is really working well for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, I love talking about this book. It's really made a big difference for me and my wife, and even our kids now. I'm starting to hear the language in a teenager's voice, and that makes me super happy.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for your time. I know that, you're writing the gift to the world that you're giving. I think it's just incredible, and appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.